Children without parents and those growing up under difficult conditions have so many needs. It's hard to know where to begin. Sina Jacob decided to start with the power of storybooks. Her organization, Bookwallah, brings the magic of storybooks and enchanting safe havens to orphans and children of trauma all over the world. Tell me a little bit more about how Bookwallah works.
When I first started, which was incorporating in 2010, I actually thought I could share the joy of reading and the magic of storybooks to orphans all around the world. And so visited projects in Indonesia, India, and through some of my founding board of directors, Jamaica, Sri Lanka. We passed beautiful storybooks donated by kids here in the United States, and it was such a fantastic experience. And I visited our first project in Mumbai with a handful of books, and I remember seeing the joy, the faraway look some of these orphan girls were giving when they were listening to a story such as Beauty and the Beast. And I knew there was something so simple about what we were doing, but it was magical. And I came back to the United States and quit my job. Gave a 2-month resignation notice, because I'm not that crazy, and I quit my job. A month later, I called our first project, and I asked Sister Eliza, how is everything? And I expected a great answer. She said the books were in a closet, and the kids were not reading them. They didn't know what to do with them. And then that's when I realized that I probably needed to dive in a little deeper to everything we were doing. And so Bookwallah starts with not only providing the storybooks generously donated by kids here in the States, but we transform environments within orphanages, and one in particular with School for the Hearing Disabled or School for the Deaf. And the final component is we use art, because part of the whole process of engaging kids is making sure it's inspiring, right? And it's magical, and they have a safe haven. They feel that they could actually be happy. And the third component is how do we engage volunteers from the local communities within the countries we're serving. If you have children in the United States donating them, are you able to provide books in the native languages of the children? We try to access some storybooks in the local languages, but what you find is that children's publishing and children's storybooks are still in the nascent stage. They don't have as much. They have a lot of mythology, but they don't have as much variety, quality of storybooks in general. And if the essential message is to help give joy to children, even through storybooks, even the Cinderellas of the world, it crosses all borders, right? All boundaries, and all national, geographic boundaries, that is. And you'll find that kids, even if they don't understand the language, the magic of opening a great story like that captures their interest, and then they start looking at how do they read. I think a lot of times we think of the power of reading and just life skills, but you talk more about the imagination. I mentioned earlier that books help me get through, and reading particularly storybooks, fairy tales, and again the Little House on the Prairie, all of these wonderful books ended up helping me get through some major hardships in my own life. And in many ways I feel these books saved my life in many ways. And so going back to the question, why storybooks? Even with the Cinderellas, children who've gone through trauma or pain in their lives, they need to have a source of inspiration. And the journey of any storybook is the hero's journey, right? You start with a struggle, and ultimately in the end you learn some values like courage, inspiration, following your passion, and ultimately transformation. So the journey of healing, empowering, and transformation is the journey that most of these storybooks, or the lessons that many of these storybooks give to the kids. When you visited the orphanages where you've sent the books, do you have some examples where you've seen firsthand the impact of this on the people you're serving? Oh, definitely. I'm very involved from the ideation to the implementation. It's still a young organization where I have to be pretty much roll my sleeves up and be hands-on with the teams, with the kids, with the programming, because we're actually building out the programming. So kids that have gone through or are experiencing our library sessions, they actually, there's many stories, but I'll give you one in particular where I think represents the power of what we're doing. A little girl, about 10, 12 years old, was sexually abused by her biological father. Wow. And, you know, she herself had a younger sister and noticed that the sister was also endangered. And she was brave enough in a society where there's so much cultural, family reputation, things like that. She was brave enough to speak up. And the father was thrown in jail, and she ended up landing in one of the orphanages where we are building and running a beautiful library. And one of our project leaders, about 6 months to 8 months after experiencing our sessions, initially angry, distrustful, upset, disruptive, she ended up giving a beautiful drawing to our project leader, Lopa, with ducks in the water and one duck flying. And her explanation to Lopa was, before I was in the river, and now sometimes I could fly. And she's only 12 years old, 13. So you know that if we continue to do what we're doing, by the time she's 18 years old, she'll be in a much better place.
What a beautiful story.
Thank you.
So one issue that's been in the news a lot lately is the refugee crisis. In the past, you've been traditionally focused on orphanages, but I've read that you're looking at expanding to refugee camps.
Yes.
Can you say more about that?
Even a nonprofit is a business, right? And so when we look at our assets, one of the things is, my focus was orphans because they're the lowest in terms of the lowest denominator in society and what they experience and the reputation they have as social outcasts in society. But to build a library, to run it, also takes a tremendous amount of resources and in-depth programming to get the results we want. So we have been fortunate and blessed that many of the U.S. kids have donated over like 30,000 books to us.
Wow.
And one of the things I thought is, can we go and help other kids, other than orphans, in that segment, right, or the beneficiaries, into children who've experienced trauma in general. So refugees is one, and you know, and you hear that in the news, they've gone through so much pain early in their lives, as well as children who've experienced catastrophe. So the Refugee Project is our first, let's say, pilot in testing whether or not these storybooks can be beneficial for the kids. And then once the situation stabilizes, we'll actually build and run a library like we do, like in India. So our first experience was on the border of Turkey and Syria through a relationship we have with the Kerem Foundation. And they have local resources and people who can actually bring the idea to life, right? And so that's an example of the refugee situation. We just recently started to look at catastrophes. So children who experienced the earthquake in Ecuador, we ended up giving beautiful storybooks and letting the local people run the program itself. You know, just reading the storybooks. Minimal involvement in that sense, but at least for an hour or two, the kids get to escape and dream. And in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the recent flooding, we're actually shipping, or delivering, not shipping, delivering by truck 2,000 storybooks to those kids because the library was entirely destroyed in one of the schools there.
Wow, that's great that you're able to be so responsive.
Yes, I'd like to even be more responsive worldwide, but if we can do something to help these kids get past that, whether it's the storybooks is the most basic thing we can do to give them that magic, then it's a wonderful thing.
I hear you're looking at a new project with the United Church of Christ.
Yes, actually there's an orphanage and school in southern India. It's called Kasam Village. It's about 3 hours from Bangalore, the tech capital of the Silicon Hub of India. And this particular orphanage and school is supported by the United Church of Christ as well as Global Ministries. And I visited a couple months ago, and it's a wonderful project. One of the employees there, Anita, reached out saying she desperately wants a beautiful library and if Bookwallah can help. And so when I visited the project, there's about over 100 children that live there from all kinds of backgrounds. And when we talk about orphans, when I talk about backgrounds, they're AIDS, HIV, to being abused, abandoned, etc., right? And so those are the types of children that are living on these grounds. And when Anita took me to the room, she had it all ready for us to actually convert it into a space, get books to her, as well as transform like we do other environments and other projects.
Thank you, Sina, for sharing Bookwallah with us. I'm Liz Dunn for Different Drummers and the Greater Chicago Broadcast Ministries. Keep the faith.